ultimate constituents of matter itself. Quantum computers have the capability of changing every aspect of our life, the economy, health, transportation, everything could be changed by quantum computers. Take a look, for example, of food supply. We rely upon fertilizers. There was a green revolution that took place that allows us to feed the population of the world. But that green revolution is slowly coming to an end. We need a second green revolution, being able to take nitrogen from the air and combine it to make ammonia and fertilizer. And already, we're trying to use quantum computers to unlock the secret of how to make fertilizer from nitrogen. Also, take a look at energy. Fusion power could one day give us unlimited energy almost for free. We're talking about an energy source where the basic fuel is seawater. Fusion plants burn seawater, the hydrogen of seawater, to create fabulous amounts of energy without nuclear waste, without the threat of a meltdown. And quantum computers may be essential to stabilize the vacuum and hydrogen so that they don't cause an accident or they don't fall apart. So in other words, quantum computers can affect the economy in basic ways, not to mention medicine. We create medicines by trial and error. We create hundreds of chemicals and test them one by one in a petri dish. This is old-fashioned, slow, but that's all there is. That's all we can do. In the future, we'll be able to model diseases at the molecular level. We'll be able to do molecular experiments in the memory of a computer rather than in a petri dish, trying to look at hundreds of chemicals to find out which one is medically relevant. In other words, we're talking about turning medicine upside down. The question is, who's involved in this race to perfect quantum computers? And the answer is everyone. If you're not part of the race, you could be irrelevant in the future. All the big names of the computer industry, Google, IBM, Honeywell, they're all in the game because they realize that you could become irrelevant. Wall Street is always looking for the next big investment, and this could be it. All of a sudden, we have companies that just started a few years ago becoming multi-billion-dollar companies as they try to put their flag on the mountain of quantum computers. This is now big business. This is one of the hottest stocks that are available on the stock market now. In other words, it's a race. All the big players in Silicon Valley are part of this race because if they're not, Silicon Valley could become the next Rust Belt. We have something called Moore's Law, which says that computer power doubles every 18 months. We take it for granted. Every Christmas, your computers are twice as powerful as the previous Christmas. The economy is based on that. But Moore's Law is falling apart. Moore's Law is getting slower and slower. Finally, it'll flatten out. And let me ask you a question. Would you upgrade your computer knowing that it's just as powerful as the last few generations of computers? No. This could cause a depression in the computer industry. We physicists called attention to this decades ago, but we said that, well, we still have a few more decades left, but it's coming. It's coming because transistors are getting smaller and smaller. A transistor today could be, let's say, 20 atoms across. When you start to hit 5 atoms across, then electrons can then hop across and create short circuits. And Moore's Law comes to an end. We're now gradually approaching that limit. When you look at the curve of the exponential growth of computer power, it's quite remarkable. This is where modern technology has taken a leap, but now we're beginning to level off, just like we predicted because of the quantum theory. Electrons are not dots. Electrons are waves. Waves are probability. And they're unstable. If you start to get electrons and then analyze them at the level of an atom. So in other words, Silicon Valley has to confront the fact that Moore's law will eventually collapse. So for all these reasons, we have to go beyond digital computers to atomic computers, computers that compute on atoms rather than on transistors. Right now, anyone who's interested in security is interested in quantum computers, because quantum computers in principle have the power to crack any digital code. Think about that for a moment. All the data that is sent on the internet is coded. National secrets of nations are encoded in these codes, which often require you to factorize very large numbers. But that's what quantum computers can do. They can factorize very large numbers and thereby crack almost any code that is based on digital technology. That's why the FBI, the CIA, and all national governments interested in computer security are following this very closely. So for example, let's say you want to have a secret that's encoded. You put a code on it, and the code says you have to factorize a digit that is, let's say, 50 digits long. It would take perhaps a few hundred years for a digital computer to factorize a number that is 50 digits long. A quantum computer may be able to do that almost instantly. And so you see the anxiety that this is being created for people involved with computer security. You're not talking about being able to break into any other computer on the earth that is based on digital technology. Now, we're not there yet, so you don't have to worry that someone's going to steal all your secrets tomorrow, but it will come. And when it comes, we're going to have a major revision of how we code our most treasured national secrets. Ordinary digital computers compute on zeros and ones, zeros and ones. But if you take a look at medicine, if you take a look at energy, you take a look at molecules, they're not based on zeros and ones, zeros and ones. They're based on electrons. And electrons can be smooth, not zeros and ones, zeros and ones. And these electrons, how come they have so much computational power? Because they could be in two places at the same time. Now at this point, you may say to yourself, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. How can you be two places at the same time? But that's exactly what electrons do. Electrons can be multiple places simultaneously at the same time. That's what gives quantum computers their power. They compute on parallel universes. Not just one universe, the universe that we're accustomed to, but an infinite number of parallel universes. Now this sounds like something from Marvel Comics. But then the question is, where did Marvel Comics get this idea? Marvel Comics got this idea from quantum physics, because the fundamental basis of quantum physics relies upon the fact that the electron can be in multiple places simultaneously at the same time. One of the big goals of quantum computers, not just creating new forms of energy, new products, new forms of transportation, but perhaps unlocking the secret of life itself. You realize that life is based on molecules, not zeros and ones, zeros and ones. Molecules that in turn can create Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, cancer. These diseases are beyond the reach of digital computers. But hey, this is what quantum computers do. They work with molecules, they work with atoms, they work with electrons. And that's why we hope that one day we'll be able to cure the incurable using quantum computers. Now, some people say, won't that put doctors, chemists, and biologists out of a job? Won't they be on the unemployment line because we don't need them anymore? No. In the future, the people on the unemployment line will be chemists and biologists who do not use quantum computers. The winners of this game will be biologists, chemists, mathematicians who use quantum computers in the same way that a carpenter uses a hammer. A hammer does not replace the carpenter. The hammer simply increases the power of the carpenter. And that's what quantum computers will do for medicine, transportation, energy, you name it, quantum computers will be there. If you look at life itself is driven by at least two types of molecules. One, of course, is proteins that make our muscles, make our body. And the second is DNA, that has the instructions by which to create new forms of life. Quantum computers operate at the molecular level. They allow you to predict different kinds of proteins, how DNA is going to interact without actually building a DNA molecule. You could do it in the memory of a computer. Now, what can digital computers do for this? The answer is almost nothing. Digital computers can only count zeros and ones, zeros and ones. They cannot simulate the motion of molecules inside DNA and inside a protein molecule. That's where quantum computers come in. Life is quantum mechanical. Life is not based on zeros and ones, zeros and ones. So how long will it take for a digital computer to simulate life? The answer is forever. You can't do it. You cannot simulate the basic chemistry of DNA and proteins on a digital computer. That's where quantum computers come in, because life itself is based on atoms and the quantum principle. Computers go all the way back to prehistory because we had to count things. As we primitive peoples became more prosperous, we had to count how many cows we had, how much grain could be harvested. We had to count these things, and that began the beginning of analog computers. Analog computers could be based on sticks, bones, levers, gears, pulleys, whatever it took to count how many cows you had, to count how much profit you made. So this went on for thousands of years until finally we reached the work of Charles Babbage. He creates the ultimate analog computer with hundreds of gears and levers and pulleys, and by turning the crank, you could then calculate longitude, latitude for ships. You could calculate interest rates. It was very valuable to have an instrument like that for the banking industry, for commerce. But then World War II comes along, and at that point we realized that Babbage's machine is simply too primitive to defeat the Germans. The Germans, of course, had their own secret code, and we had to break it in order to win World War II. So the job was given to mathematicians like Alan Turing. Alan Turing was the one who codified a lot of the laws of computation into what is called a Turing machine. He basically introduced the power of logic and mathematics to reduce computation to a simple series of manipulations. Every computer on the earth, every digital computer, is a Turing machine. And of course, it's digital. It operates on zeros and ones, zeros and ones. But then we went into the quantum era with Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize winner, but he was also a practical joker, as well as one of the founders of quantum electrodynamics. For example, he worked on the atomic bomb. But as a prank, he got a sheet of paper and wrote something like, "Guess who?" question mark on that sheet of paper, put it in the safe, and sealed it up. Well, the next day, the authorities opened that safe and found the message, "Guess who?" There was panic at Los Alamos. Some spy had gotten the secret of the atomic bomb and was basically toying with the authorities. Well, that's Richard Feynman, practical joker, but also a visionary. And he asked himself a simple question: how small can you make a transistor? That's a simple statement, right? Transistors control the flow of electricity, They're either off or on, open or closed. That's called the transistor. And then he said, how small can you make a transistor? And he realized that the ultimate transistor is an atom. One atom that could control the flow of electricity, not just on or off, but everything in between. As we mentioned, if this is an atom, it can spin North Pole or it can flip in the South Pole. This is how transistors work. Transistors are either open or closed to electric current. But atoms can spin in any direction simultaneously. That's the power of quantum computers. They compute not on zeros and ones, but everything in between simultaneously. That is incredible. For example, let's take a mouse and put a mouse in a maze and let a digital computer calculate what happens when a mouse is in a maze. Every time the mouse hits a joint, a juncture, it has to decide left or right, left or right. And then it goes to the next juncture and has to decide left or right. Very tedious, very slow, but that's how a digital computer analyzes a mouse inside a maze. Now, how does a quantum computer analyze it? It looks at all possible left-rights, all possible paths of the mouse simultaneously, instantly, analyzes all of them all at once. So how much faster is a quantum computer over a digital computer? In principle, infinitely faster. Think about that. We're talking about a new revolution in counting, able to count hundreds, thousands, millions of paths instantly at the speed of light. Something which our bodies do, we call that biology, medicine. Our atoms, our hormones, our proteins do that all the time.
Come on over here.
But we, using digital computers, calculate with zeros and ones, zeros and ones, zeros and ones, a tedious, slow process that Mother Nature does not use at all. Mother Nature is smarter than us. So you would think that after World War II, he would be heralded as the hero that saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people that helped to defeat the Nazis. Nope. His work was classified. It was considered too sensitive to be released to the public. And it's a very sad story. One day, somebody burglarized his house. He called the police. The police investigated his belongings and realized that he was gay. As a consequence, he was arrested. And he was tried and sentenced. For punishment, he was injected with hormones that made him grow breasts and feminized him, changed his whole body. Of course, Alan Turing was very much mentally destabilized by this, and one day they found his lifeless body because apparently he committed suicide. And next to him was an apple laced with cyanide poison, an apple that he ate to commit suicide. And so some people think that the symbol of Apple computers is that apple. The apple that we all have on our laptop and our Apple hardware could be a memory of what Alan Turing did to the field of artificial intelligence and the digital computer. He saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, and yet he was totally unknown to the British people. Well, Alan Turing also pioneered artificial intelligence. He said that people who work with artificial intelligence are barking up the wrong tree. There's no definition of artificial intelligence. So he came up with a test rather than a definition. You put a human in a box, you put a robot in a second box, and you are allowed to ask any question you want to see which box contains the human and which box contains the robot. This is the Turing test. It's been done many times, and so far, every time, the Turing test has not been able to fool a human. Every time this test has been done, eventually humans can ask a question that'll trip up the robot, and we say, aha, there's a robot there. But Turing said that it's only a matter of time before one day a robot passes the Turing test and becomes indistinguishable from a human being. Well, we'll wait and see. It's a tragedy of history that the father of artificial intelligence and the father of the electronic digital computer is pretty much unknown. We celebrate, of course, the people who built the atomic bomb, but what about the man who pioneered the digital computer and artificial intelligence, Alan Turing? Well, that's why I was pleased when the movie came out, The Imitation Game, the first Hollywood movie that allows people to understand the tears, the sweat, the toil that went into creating the computer revolution. We tend to think that an advanced computer is a modern technology because, of course, it involves so many calculations, so intricate, but that's not true. 2,000 years ago, there was a shipwreck, and in the boat that sank was a device that was encrusted with coral and dirt. But when you brushed away the dirt and debris, you began to realize that it was a machine of incredible complexity. It was, in fact, a computer. This amazed the work of archaeologists around the world. It was the world's first analog computer, and it was designed to map the motion of the moon, the sun, and the planet, to map the motion of the known universe. Now, Charles Babbage is sometimes called the father of the computer because he built this gigantic machine that, when assembled, actually weighed several tons. You turned the crank and allowed you to make enormous calculations, longitude, latitude, interest rates, things like that. But somebody went one step beyond that. Lady Lovelace was a member of the aristocracy. She had a background in mathematics, and she was curious about this machine that was being built by Charles Babbage, and she realized that a machine of this complexity, you have to have instructions for it, because you don't want to just calculate one number. You want to calculate a series of numbers that give you the answer to a problem. For that, you have to have instructions. These instructions are called a program. And so in some sense, Ms. Lovelace was the first programmer programming an analog computer to crank out not just one number, but as many numbers as you want by following the rules of a program. So she was the world's first programmer. Now, the digital revolution is based on transistors. So what is a transistor? A transistor is a valve. When you turn the valve, then you allow electrons to flow in a pipe. Think of the water in plumbing to be electricity and the transistor to be a valve. With a little bit of turning the valve, you can shut off the water completely or leave it open. The valve can give you 0 or 1. 1 means water can flow. 0 means you turn the valve, you shut off the pipe, and water doesn't flow at all. So that's how plumbing and transistors are very similar. Plumbing allows you to control the flow of water in a well-structured way. That's why transistors are so powerful. But transistors are based on zeros and ones. Zeros and ones. Reality is not. Reality is based on electrons and particles. And these particles in turn act like waves. So you have to have a new set of mathematics to discuss the waves that make up a molecule. And that's where quantum computers come in. Because quantum computers are not just off and on, off and on. We're talking about electrons that can spin in any orientation simultaneously. That's why quantum computers can simulate quantum devices. And the most intricate quantum device is you. You are the byproduct of quantum mechanics. If you turned off quantum mechanics, what would happen to your body? It would dissolve. It would dissolve into a bunch of random subatomic particles. What holds these particles together? The quantum principle. Quantum mechanics holds your atoms together. It holds your body together. It allows your atoms to interact with other atoms, to create catalysts, to create DNA and protein. So what has quantum mechanics done for you lately? The answer is everything. At the fundamental level, quantum mechanics can be reduced down to a cat, Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger was one of the founders of quantum mechanics, even though he hated this new interpretation of quantum mechanics based on probability. Let's take a box. In the box, you put a cat with a gun. The gun is aimed at the cat, and the question is the cat dead or alive? Well, until you open the box, you don't know. The cat could either be dead or alive simultaneously. Before you open the box, you don't know if the cat is dead or alive. But if the gun goes off, then of course the cat can be killed. You open the box and the cat is dead. But there's also a probability that the cat is not killed by the bullet. You open the box and the cat is alive. So then the question is, and this is the question that split the physics community for decades, what is the cat like before you open the box? And the answer is, it's in a superposition of two states. It is alive and dead simultaneously.
Even I can't take this.
In other words, the universe has split in half. In one half of the universe, the cat is alive. In the other universe, the cat is dead. Now that sounds crazy, but hey, get used to it. That's the basis of the quantum theory, that until you make a measurement, the cat can exist in both states simultaneously. In fact, in any number of states simultaneously.
Oh, I did not have this
Now,
much
when you take a philosophy course,
trouble first
you
time I
learn
did
the
this.
famous paradox of when a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to listen to the tree fall, then the question is, did the tree fall at all? Well, this is even worse, because before you open the box, the cat could be dead, alive, playing, jumping, sideways, sick, any number of states before you open the box. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because this summarizes the power of quantum computers. Quantum computers compute on parallel universes. That's why they are so powerful. Because the cat is not just in one state, the cat is in all these parallel states simultaneously. Now, Steven Weinberg, one of the founders of modern quantum theory, explained it in this way. When you go into a room with a radio, your radio can pick up all sorts of frequencies, but your radio is tuned to one frequency. Your radio is coherent with one frequency, just one, and that's what you hear on the radio. Now, that room that you're sitting in is made out of electrons. Electrons are also waves. Waves of everything. Waves of pirates. Waves of dinosaurs. Waves of UFOs and Martians. All of that, all these waves inside the room. But you are only tuned to one frequency. You can only see one reality. You cannot see the dinosaurs. You cannot see the pirates, but they're there. But you cannot interact with them anymore. So this is how we physicists explain the cat problem. The fact that yes, the cat in some sense can exist in all these different universes, but you only vibrate in one frequency. Therefore, you cannot see the dinosaurs in your bedroom. When quantum computers were first theorized by physicists like Richard Feynman, people thought that, well, it's an academic exercise. Atoms are so small, the slightest vibration can upset the whole calculation, so it's an academic question whether or not quantum computers exist or not. Well, we don't think like that anymore, because now we make quantum computers. This is reality, that we can now play with quantum computers. In fact, you can even download a quantum computer on your laptop. You can actually connect your laptop to a quantum computer created by IBM and Google. And so it's real. So what is quantum supremacy? Quantum supremacy is the point at which a quantum computer can outrace and outperform a digital computer on a certain task. We passed that several years ago. We are already in the realm where for certain specific tasks, the quantum computer can outrace the world's fastest digital supercomputer. We're now in an entirely different realm, a realm where we're actually creating these things. This is no longer a question of speculation. It's a question of a race between the Chinese and many US companies that are jumping into the quantum computer game. When we talk about digital computers, we can measure their power in terms of bits. For example, spin up, spin down, zeros and one, would constitute 1 bit. And for a large digital computer, we're now talking about billions of bits that are modeled by transistors. So the number of bits on a digital computer allows you to calculate how powerful it is. The same thing for quantum computers, except now quantum computers talk not just about spin up or spin down, but everything in between. That's called a qubit. A qubit is not just up or down. 1 qubit represents all the possibilities of an object spinning between up and down. The question is, where are we today? Already we're talking about hundreds of qubits that can be modeled by a quantum computer. Very soon, it'll be a few thousand qubits. And just remember that when quantum computers first emerged,
dang, bro, I'm gonna die
the first
again.
calculation was 3 times 5 is 15. Now a child knows that, but 3 times 5 is 15 was done on atoms. That was a huge breakthrough. Now we're talking about thousands of qubits can now be modeled with the latest generation of quantum computers. Eventually, we hope to hit 1 million. And so we're talking about exceeding the power of ordinary digital computers. On specific problems, we've already done that. But we want a general machine, a machine that could exceed the power of any digital computer. We're not there yet, but we're very close to it. There are several analogies that explain the power of quantum computers. Think of a digital computer and think of a room full of accountants. Each accountant does one calculation and passes it to the next, then does another calculation, passes it to the next accountant. A very slow process, but hey, that's what digital computers do. Now, take a look at a quantum computer. In a quantum computer, all the accountants are working simultaneously, not one by one, but simultaneously. And therefore, you know the power of a quantum computer. Digital computers will take an almost infinite amount of time to do what a quantum computer can do almost instantly, because it can choose simultaneously on many qubits, not just one after the next, after the next. That shows you the power of quantum computers. Another problem with quantum computers is the question of decoherence. In other words, everything is based on particles like electrons, and electrons have waves associated with them. When these waves are vibrating in unison, it's called coherence. And then you can do calculations of a quantum mechanical nature. But if you fall out of coherence, then everything vibrates at a different frequency. Now what is that called? Noise. So that's the number one problem facing quantum computers. You have to reduce the temperature down to near absolute zero. So everything is pretty much vibrating slowly in unison. That's difficult because you need to have super cool liquids and different kinds of technologies to bring down the temperature so that everything is coherent. Now, nature solves this problem. Photosynthesis, for example, is a quantum mechanical process. We still don't understand photosynthesis. It is the basis of all life on the Earth, and it's a quantum mechanical property. And we still don't know quite how it works. But Mother Nature can create coherence at room temperature. Amazing. A flower can do calculations that our most advanced quantum computer cannot. So Mother Nature has solved the problem. We have not. We have to use liquid helium and different kinds of super cool substances to bring down the temperature to near absolute zero. Mother Nature does it with sunlight. Mother Nature is still smarter than us when it comes to the quantum theory. Some people ask the question, well, how will I as a person interact with quantum computers? Well, we have a cell phone, and that cell phone allows you to contact a whole bank of supercomputers to carry out your wishes. So in other words, in the future, you're not going to have a quantum computer inside your cell phone. Your cell phone will allow you to communicate with a series of quantum computers in the cloud. So supercomputation will be done in the cloud, and you'll be able to access that knowledge in your cell phone. My personal hope for quantum computers is that we'll be able to create a theory of the entire universe. I work in something called string theory, which we think is the ultimate theory. The theory that eluded Einstein, the theory that would explain black holes and supernovas and galactic evolution, a theory of cosmology of the entire universe. But the equations are so complicated, no one's been able to crack them. Perhaps a quantum computer would be able to extract real numbers from string theory so that we could then compare it with what we see in the laboratory. And so that would clinch it. So then we would say, aha, this is, in fact, the theory of everything, and here's how to prove it.
Chapter 2, String Theory.
Albert Einstein spent the last 30 years of his life chasing after a theory of everything. An equation, perhaps no more than 1 inch long, that would allow us to summarize all the great laws of the universe. In other words, to quote, read the mind of God. These are Einstein's words. And he failed. He failed because, well, the universe is much more complex than Einstein thought. We have all these subatomic particles now, hundreds of subatomic particles. How are we going to make sense out of the vast diversity of matter we see around us? Well, the leading candidate right now is called string theory. String theory first bursts on the scene around 1968. The Vietnam War was at its height at that point. I remember when that theory first came out because I was in the Army. And there I was, dodging machine gun bullets, going through a maze of grenades and fields of explosives in them. And I was learning string theory for the first time. And I was amazed at its simplicity, its power. But there I was in the Army. When I got out of the Army, then I started to publish in this field because of the promise that it was the theory that eluded Einstein for the last 30 years of his life. String theory is based on music. So in other words, all these subatomic particles are nothing but musical notes on a tiny vibrating string. So this would be an electron, this would be a quark, this would be Yang-Mills particles. Different vibrations give you different particles, and that would explain why we have so many subatomic particle. What is physics? Physics is the harmonies. The harmonies we can make on these vibrating strings. What are subatomic particles? Each vibration is a subatomic particle. So what is chemistry? Chemistry is the molecules that you can create when strings bump into other strings. That's called chemistry. So then, what is the universe? The universe is a symphony of strings. And then what is the mind of God? The mind of God is cosmic music resonating through hyperspace. That would be the mind of God. Now, some people come up to me and say, Professor, maybe I don't like string theory. Give me an alternative. Well, for you industrious people out there in the audience, there are 3 criteria for the theory of everything. If you can find an equation that satisfies 3 criteria, you will be heralded as the next Albert Einstein. What are these 3 criteria? First, your theory would have to include all of the theory of gravity of Albert Einstein. Statement number 2, it would have to explain why we have so many subatomic particles, hundreds of subatomic particles. Your theory must explain all these subatomic particles. Third, your theory must be free of mathematical anomalies, inconsistencies, divergences. In other words, it must be mathematically usable, testable against the reality that we see around us. If you can come up with a theory that obeys these 3 criteria, what should you do? You should call me first. And we'll publish together, and we'll share the Nobel Prize money together, you and me. A Nobel Prize waiting if you can find a theory that satisfies just 3 criteria. Has to explain Einstein's theory of gravity, it has to explain why we have so many subatomic particles, and the theory must be mathematically consistent. If you can get it, you will be heralded as the next Einstein. So, what is the leading candidate to rival string theory? Well, the leading candidate right now is called loop quantum gravity. But loop quantum gravity has problems. First of all, it does contain Einstein's theory of gravity, but it says nothing about particles. There's no electron. There's no proton. There's no neutron. Matter as we know it is not there. Loop quantum gravity is a theory of pure gravity with no particles. Therefore, it cannot describe the universe as we see it, because the universe as we see it has subatomic particles, like the electron, like the atom. What are we made of? And so, in that sense, string theory is the only theory that combines Einstein's theory of gravity with a theory of particles. What are particles? Vibrations on a vibrating string. Every once in a while, the newspapers herald the coming of a new theory. Perhaps this is the theory that eluded Einstein. But then you read the fine print. And then 9 times out of 10, the theory that's being proposed is a theory of pure gravity. No electrons, no protons. And that's what kills loop quantum gravity. But here we are, made out of atoms. Atoms have to be part of your theory. And so most of the theories that you see in the papers that claim to be a theory of everything, all you have to do is ask a simple question. Where is the electron in your theory? And you'll find out, whoops, none of these theories have electrons in them. In other words, they don't work. One day, a famous physicist, Wolfgang Pauli, gave a talk at Columbia University advertising his version of the theory of everything. Well, Niels Bohr, one of the founders of the quantum theory, was in the audience. Niels Bohr stood up and he said, Professor, we in the back are convinced that your theory is crazy. But what divides us is whether your theory is crazy enough. In other words, the theory of everything has to be fantastic. It has to be incredible. It has to be crazy. Why does it have to be crazy? Because all the easy problems were picked off. All the easy stuff was shown to be inconsistent, mathematically or physically. The theory of everything has to be crazy. Totally different from anything ever proposed. And that's where string theory comes in. The string theory is crazy. Everyone who's looked at the theory says, oh my God, this is a crazy theory. So crazy that it may be correct. The main criticism, which has to be taken seriously, the main criticism of string theory is, well, where's the beef? Where are these particles that are predicted by string theory? String theory predicts the electron, it predicts the proton, it predicts the world that we see around it. But, and it's a huge but, it also predicts other particles. Particles heavier than what you see around it. So where are those particles predicted by string theory? One idea is that these particles make up dark matter. Dark matter is relatively new. You now realize that when you look at the stars, you look at the galaxies in the universe, we see more than just hydrogen and helium. We see a new form of matter called dark matter, which is invisible, but there it is in outer space. We think that the next octave of the string is dark matter. But we can't prove it yet because we don't have dark matter in a bottle. One day we'll have dark matter in a bottle created by our particle accelerators, and then we'll test it to see whether or not dark matter is the same thing as was predicted by string theory. So that's the weakest link, and that's one way to prove the theory is correct, by looking for dark matter, an invisible matter that holds the galaxy together. And we're clueless to understand what it's made of. But when we look at the proton and we say to ourselves, what is a proton made of? It's made out of 3 quarks. 3 quarks make up a proton. It seems to fit the data. However, when you try to calculate with quarks, no one has ever been able to extract out a proton out of 3 quarks, mathematically speaking. How do we do it in reality then? We do it by computers. Now, can you do it mathematically without a computer? We've tried. So far, nobody has been able to extract a proton by combining 3 quarks together. Now, it may turn out that subatomic particles are so complicated that no human can mathematically solve string theory completely. It may have to be done by computers, and that's where quantum computers come in. Quantum computers may ultimately settle the question, is there a theory of everything? And if so, is it string theory? Now, let me quote from a science fiction novel, The Restaurant at the End of the Galaxy. In that novel, a race of extraterrestrials decide to calculate the theory of everything. So they create a supercomputer that chugs and chugs and chugs to calculate the theory of everything. Well, after many eons of working on this problem, the computer announces that it's finished. It has finally found the meaning of the universe. And the meaning of the universe is 42. Well, you can imagine the disappointment. Is that all there is? Well, that's a danger. The danger is that maybe we do find the theory of everything, but it's not what we thought it was. Well, I think it should be incredible, fantastic, the culmination of all our work aiming toward a theory of everything. It should be fantastic. String theory is already fantastic, but maybe the next layer beyond string theory is an explanation for dark matter, black holes, and the universe that we see around us. Just waiting for a young, enterprising physicist to figure it all out.
Chapter 3. Are we in a simulation?
Ever since ancient times, people have asked the question, is the world a dream? Is everything around us an illusion created by some god to test us? Well, the modern version of that is this. Is the universe a computer game? Are we just dancing puppets in a computer game, obeying the laws of some computer someplace out there in the universe? Is everything basically a fake? Well, that theory got a tremendous boost with the Matrix series. Because in the Matrix, what we thought was real was actually a computer simulation. Is that possible? Well, the answer is probably no.
What's got me?
But for a very sophisticated reason. If you want to simulate the weather, for example, you have to simulate the motion of trillions upon trillions of atoms. No computer is that powerful that it can simulate the motion of trillions and trillions of atoms that just make up the atoms in this room. You can't do it. And atoms are quantum mechanical. Atoms obey the quantum principle, so you don't really know where they are at any given point. So there's an infinite number of universes that are possible right in your room. It is mathematically not possible to create a fictional universe out of atoms in a fictional way. So, sorry about that. The universe is not an illusion. Now, some people ask another question. What if the universe is an almost simulation? That's possible. Maybe you cannot simulate trillions and trillions of atoms because of something called the butterfly effect. Now, what's the butterfly effect? The butterfly effect is that when a butterfly flaps its wings, there's a certain small probability that the waves created by the butterfly will be magnified as it progresses, and eventually it becomes a storm. The point I'm raising is no computer is powerful enough to do that computation. The amount of information necessary to simulate atoms is absolutely staggering. You're talking about 10 to the, let's say, 25. One with 25 zeros after it, just to model the atoms inside a goldfish bowl. So we're talking about a fabulous amount of information necessary to create a model of a dream. So in other words, chances are we do not live in a computer simulation. Sorry about that. If you're a fan of the movies, you know that almost all the Marvel Comics movies are based in a parallel universe. And if you watch the Oscars, you find that the #1 movie in the Oscars is also based on parallel universes. And the question is, where did all this interest come from? It came from the quantum theory and string theory. This is one example of where advances in pure physics have helped to fertilize the entertainment industry. Because the hottest thing in Hollywood today is the multiverse. So if you watch the Oscar-winning movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, you have to realize that where did the idea come from? The idea comes from physics. And even today, we theoretical physicists are debating the question, how real are these parallel universes?
Chapter 4. Intelligent Life Beyond Earth.
What computers need is data. Data by which we can draw conclusions. And when we talk about intelligence in outer space, we have to be open to the idea that their intelligence may be quite different from our intelligence. And therefore the question is, how do we tell? How do we tell where real intelligence is, given the fact that it could be more than one type of intelligence? Well, let me give you an example. For the Science Channel, they once put me in a swimming pool with dolphins. Sensors picked up the squeals and chirps from the dolphins as I was swimming next to the dolphins, and then they ran it through a computer. The computer looked for regularities in the chirps and squeals of dolphins, realizing that they speak a totally different language than humans, and their criterion for intelligence would be different from our criteria of intelligence. So for example, the letter E is the most common letter in the English alphabet. And you can rank the frequency with which certain letters are used to pinpoint who wrote the article. For example, who wrote Shakespeare? Many people have claimed that other writers wrote Shakespearean plays, not Shakespeare himself, but you can run the set of information of Shakespeare's plays through a computer. And sure enough, the signature can be shown to be that of Shakespeare. The frequency of the letter E, the frequency of the letter I, and so on and so forth, allows you to pinpoint who wrote that article. So when you run the videotape and the audio tape of the dolphins through a computer, you find, bingo, yes, they are intelligent. Yes, there's a pattern, a regularity to their chirps, and so on and so forth. And then you go down the evolutionary scale. You go down to dogs, cat, rabbit, mice, insects. By the time you reach insects, it's pretty much nonsense. They have a communication system, but very little intelligence other than to alert themselves for food, danger, and stuff like that. And so it is possible to rank intelligence using computers that look for an algorithm that allows you to see where intelligence lies. We'll do that in outer space now. We physicists have often wondered, are there signs of intelligent life in the galaxy? And if so, how advanced might they be? So we categorize these alien civilizations on the basis of energy consumption. Type 1 would be planetary. They control the weather. They control earthquakes, volcanoes. Anything planetary, they control because they have the energy of a planet. Then there's type 2. A type 2 civilization has exhausted the power of their planet, and they use the sun. They basically take the energy from their sun to power their machines. Sort of like the Federation of Planets in Star Trek. Star Trek would be a type 2 civilization. Then there's type 3, galactic. They roam the galactic space lanes. They play with black holes, sort of like the Empire of Empire Strikes Back. That would be a type 3 civilization. And then the question is, what are we? We are type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. We don't even rate on this scale. We have not attained planetary energy at all. That would be type 1. We're stuck at type 0. But what would it take to move between universes? What would it take to enter a black hole? What would it take to break the light barrier? You would have to reach the energy of type 3. And the energy of type 3 is called the Planck energy. The Planck energy is the energy of the Big Bang. It's the energy of a black hole. It's the energy, the greatest energy in the universe, and that is the Planck energy. How long before we can attain the Planck energy and move between universes? Well, a modest calculation shows that you would have to be about maybe 100,000 years more advanced than us in order to go between universes, to harness the Planck energy, to leave our universe. So chances are, if one day we meet an intelligent civilization, they would be maybe 100,000 years more advanced than us. Then the next question is, how would we know of a type 3 or type 2 civilization if we were to bump into one? Let's say that scanning the heavens, we see evidence of a type 2, type 3 civilization. How would we know? Well, we've looked. We've looked for type 2 because type 2 civilizations give off an energy, a characteristic black body radiation that we can measure. So far, we find none. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't these civilizations out there. It just means that our devices are so primitive that we have not yet been able to conclusively show that they exist. But if they can break the light barrier, if they can go faster than the speed of light, then it's possible they may have the energy of a wormhole. And at that point, they would be type 3. They would have the energy, the Planck energy, to create universes or to move between universes. Historically, when physicists were asked about flying saucers and UAPs and extraterrestrial civilizations, the bottom line is data. You have to have data. You just can't say that, gee, I saw something going across the sky last night. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But now we finally have data. The United States Navy has admitted that yes, there are hours of videotapes that can be analyzed to calculate the characteristics of these things. We now realize that these objects, whatever they are, can travel up to Mach 20 times the speed of sound. And they can accelerate from Mach 5 to Mach 20 very, very rapidly. And they can even fly underwater, believe it or not, underwater, in the air, into outer space. And they zigzag. When you calculate the centrifugal force inside the rocket ship, you realize that any living thing would be crushed by the zigzagging of these objects, whatever they are. We're talking about a new law of engineering beyond anything that we can muster here on the planet Earth. The ability to fly up at Mach 20, the ability to fly underwater, the ability to zigzag. These things require technology beyond anything we have. So we now have the data. Is it an optical illusion? Or is it extraterrestrial? We don't know until we analyze the data. And now we have physicists looking frame by frame and perhaps coming up with a conclusion as to where these objects come from. Well, about 90% of these sightings can be explained using natural phenomenon, or weather balloons, or weather anomalies, or meteorites. Most of them can be explained. 10% of them seem to defy the known laws of engineering, so we have to look at them very carefully. And some of them have multiple sightings by multiple modes. That's the gold standard. We met that gold standard on several occasions. Back in the 1980s, there was a JAL flight going across Alaska, and all of a sudden they found two objects flying next to it. These two objects were then tracked by radar, tracked visually, so there was multiple sightings using multiple modes. And then a third flying saucer came up next to it, so there were three objects now flying next to this JAL flight. Well, afterwards, when the flight landed, the pilots made the announcement that they saw a flying saucer, but then what happened? Very important. At that point, the pilots were given desk jobs, basically demoted. And that sent a chill throughout the industry, because if you say that you saw something unusual in your airplane, you would be given a desk job, and you wouldn't fly again. So in other words, keep your mouth shut. As a consequence, no data, very little data, has been collected until recently. And that's what we physicists need. Data, so that we can make objective statements about what these things are. Now, the burden of proof has shifted. The burden of proof is on the military now to prove that these things aren't extraterrestrial. And that's a sea change. Now we realize that we're sitting on hours of videotape. We're sitting on a mountain of data. The data has to be analyzed frame by frame to figure out what these objects are, what the flight characteristics are, and who's behind them. So things have changed now. Now we have access to videotapes, and now the burden of proof is to prove that these things aren't extraterrestrial. What happened was, citizens' pressure put pressure on certain politicians. These politicians, in turn, put pressure on the military to declassify some of this information. So that's how it happened. There is the FOIA Act, the Freedom of Information Act that allows citizens to gain access to some classified information, but it's a long, torturous process. But some of it is now reaching the press. That yes, the military is owning up to the fact that it's sitting on a gold mine of data that has to be analyzed frame by frame.
Want to support the channel? Join the Big Think members community where you get access to videos early, ad-free.
Could black holes be the key to a quantum theory of gravity, a deeper theory of how reality, of how space and time works? Black holes are interesting because we have a place called the event horizon where we think that we have full control of the physics. We understand what's happening, but there's a fundamental clash between our two basic theories of nature, both quantum theory and general relativity together. And the quest to unify those two great pillars of 20th and 21st century physics into what's often referred to as quantum theory of gravity is in some sense a holy grail for theoretical physicists. So black holes are forcing us into a deeper understanding of what space and time is. And in that sense, I think it is fair to say that black holes are the keys to understanding the universe. I am Brian Cox. I'm a professor of particle physics at the University of Manchester and the Royal Society Professor for Public Engagement and Science. And amongst other things, I'm the author of the book Black Holes, the Key to Understanding the Universe. The idea of black holes goes back a long way, actually, back into the 1780s and 1790s. There were two physicists, mathematicians, natural philosophers, whatever you want to call them, working at the time, that had the same idea apparently independently of each other. One was a clergyman called Mitchell, and the other was the great French mathematician Laplace. And they were both
literally as soon
thinking
as I beat
in
it, the game
terms of
crashes.
an idea called escape velocity. The escape velocity is the speed you have to travel to completely escape the gravitational pull of
So
something,
dumb.
a planet or a star. So for the Earth, for example, the escape velocity from the surface of the Earth is around 8 miles a second. If you go bigger, you make a bigger, more massive thing, let's go up to a star, for example, like the Sun, it's somewhere in the region of 400 miles a second. The escape velocity increases because the gravitational pull at the surface increases. What Mitchell and Laplace thought, and I think it's a very beautiful idea, is they imagined in their mind's eye, well, can you go bigger? Can you imagine more and more massive stars, giant stars, such that the gravitational pull is so large at the surface that the escape velocity exceeds the speed of light? And then you wouldn't be able to see them.
Looks good on.
To understand why black holes cause so many conceptual problems, it might be worth just describing very briefly what a black hole looks like. So, a black hole, what do you see from the outside? Well, there's an event horizon surrounding the black hole. In some sense, it defines the boundary between the external universe and the interior of the black hole. And if you go across the boundary into the interior of this sphere, then even if you can travel as fast as the speed of light, you can't escape the gravitational pull of a black hole. But another description of the event horizon, which confused people all the way through the history of black hole research actually, was the idea that the event horizon, when viewed from the outside, is a place in space where time stops. Now that's a direct prediction of Einstein's theory of relativity from the external perspective. There is a central problem, though, which is still not solved, which is what lies at the centre of a black hole. You might think of it as an infinitely dense point to which this massive star collapses. So what do we picture? It's this thing called a singularity. Actually, It's not right to talk about the centre of a black hole, really. Just even in pure general relativity, when you look at a nice map of a black hole, the so-called Penrose diagram named after Roger Penrose, what you see is that space and time are so distorted that in some sense their roles swap. The singularity is not really a place in space at all. It's a moment in time. And actually, it's the end of time. But the nature of that thing wasn't and is still not understood. And for many, many years, actually, until quite recently, then people thought, well, there we are, we have a problem with the singularity, we don't really have any access to it, we don't have the conceptual tools to explore it, so it may remain a mystery for a century to come. It's not clear what to do. The great revolution in black hole research was to notice that actually there are conceptual problems, not only with frequencies, singularity, and heat, but at the horizon. What Stephen Hawking showed in a landmark couple of papers is that if you consider quantum theory, quantum particles in the vicinity of the horizon of a black hole, then you find that they glow, they produce particles, they have a temperature. This thing that we pictured in Einstein's theory as pure geometry, just distorted space and time, actually emits particles. It's called Hawking radiation. And Stephen, in his 1974 paper, gives this hand-wavy description, which is kind of a nice way to picture what's happening. The idea is to zoom in the vicinity of the event horizon of a black hole. You can picture what's happening. There's a series of particles coming in and out of existence all the time, so-called entangled particles. And so one of those pairs of particles is on the inside of the event horizon and one is on the outside. And then it can happen that the one on the outside, instead of merging back with its partner again, can escape into the universe, removing energy from the black hole as it goes, therefore it's shrinking, which means that one day it will be gone. That has profound implications. So black holes are not eternal prisms, they have a lifetime. One day, whatever's in there is returned to the universe. The question was, the central question that was immediately raised by those calculations is this: what happened to all this stuff that fell in? The way I described this, the way Einstein's theory describes it, is somehow that stuff goes to the singularity, whatever that thing is, the end of time, the region of space-time that's so convoluted and distorted that we don't understand how to describe it. But then, one day, the whole thing is gone. All that's left in the far, far future is Hawking radiation. Those particles that were produced in the vicinity of the event horizon. The question is it possible, if you could collect all that radiation, all the Hawking radiation through the whole life of the black hole, is it somehow possible, intrinsically, that the information, that everything that fell into the black hole throughout its history is imprinted in that radiation in the far future? Is that true, or is it not? You might say, why did I ask that question? It seems like a bit of a random. It's a very important question. Information is constant in the universe, as far as we know. So every law of nature that we have says that information is constant. So let's say that I take a book and I set fire to it, I incinerate it, I destroy it in any way that I can. In basic fundamental physics, then it turns out that if you could collect every piece of that thing that I detonated or incinerated, every quantum of radiation, every photon, every particle, everything, in principle, if I could just collect it all, then I could reconstruct the thing that I had destroyed. The problem was black holes, quantum mechanics, general relativity. When you put them together, you have this apparent prediction that these things erase information from the universe. This became known as the black hole information paradox. It turns out, if we fast forward to the present day, and a series of papers which are still being written, this is still research that's happening as we speak. But it turns out now that the general view is that black holes do not erase information from the universe. We now think you could collect all that radiation and, in principle, put it in some quantum computer and reconstruct the information about everything that fell in. But the implications of that the mechanism by which that happens, I would say it's profoundly exciting, because it really does seem to be giving us a glimpse of a deeper theory of gravity. The simple way to say it, let me say it in one sentence, it seems that space and time are not fundamental. So one view, and I emphasise that there are other views, we're at the cutting edge of research now, but one view is a field which has become known as emergent space-time. And so the idea is that space and time themselves emerge from what? From quantum entanglement, from some kind of smaller parts or pieces. We don't know what those things are. We don't know the nature of them. But it does seem that there's a deeper underlying theory from which space and time emerge. That is what we call the quantum theory of gravity. And my view is that if we're going to talk about the origin of the universe, even ask questions such as, did the universe have a beginning in time, which we don't know the answer to, then it surely seems to me that we have to understand what space and time are before we can ask and have any chance of answering such questions. And black holes, it turns out, are the objects that we can see, that we can observe, that actually exist in nature, that force us down that route to ask questions, sharp, well-defined questions actually, about the nature of space and time themselves. Einstein said that if you look at nature really carefully and keep pulling at the intellectual threads and keep going and just keep delving down into what nature seems to be trying to tell us, then if you're lucky and persistent, you can catch a glimpse of something deeply hidden. It's beautiful, that, isn't it? A glimpse of something deeply hidden, which is the deep underlying structure of nature, the deep underlying structure of reality itself. And I think it's very beautiful. No one really knows, I think it's fair to say, where this is going, but they're hints of something deeply hidden.
Get smarter, faster with videos from the world's biggest thinkers.
Great work.
Want to dive deeper? Become a Big Think member and join our members-only community. Watch videos early and unlock full interviews.
Peace. Rest. Contemplation, even. You must have some questions. How can I help you? Listen, I signed a brutal NDA to get... We're not sure. We're a science company.
Enrico Fermi is one of the great physicists, legendary Italian physicist, who laid many of the foundations of modern 20th century physics. The Fermi paradox, probably the thing he spent least time on actually, is almost one throwaway remark. The question is, where are they? By they, I mean aliens. We know that we live in a big old galaxy, in a big old universe. The Milky Way galaxy, we now know, has something like 400 billion suns. And we now know that most of those suns have planetary systems around them. And so there's a lot of real estate, and there's been plenty of time for civilizations to develop. The Fermi paradox, at its heart, is the statement that, notwithstanding the fact that there have been billions of years on billions of worlds for civilizations to arise, we see no evidence of any of them in the galaxy at all. So the paradox is, why? A possible answer to the Fermi paradox, the question of why there are no civilizations, is because the Earth is pretty much unique in the Milky Way galaxy, in that the climate, the conditions on Earth were stable enough for long enough for life to go from cell to civilization. If you think about it, that's a big ask. We know that we live in a violent universe. We know there are supernova explosions all over the place. We know that there have been impacts on the Earth, the famous impact that wipes out the large dinosaurs. There's been no impact big enough to break the unbroken chain of life for 4 billion years. So maybe it's the case that whilst there are billions of planets which may have liquid water on the surface, may have oceans that can support life, it may be that none of those planets in the Milky Way galaxy have been stable enough for long enough to produce civilizations. So that would be a property of the planet itself, the so-called rare Earth hypothesis. Another explanation for the Fermi paradox might be that civilizations live and die. They rise and then they fall. And because of the sheer timescales
Bejubat, welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
Oh man, I'm excited about this
Me
one.
too.
I'm really excited about this one. So, but I want to dive right into this. I'm sorry I cut you off on that conversation. We got to have this on the show.
Yeah.
But you were looking at the bar over there and asking, if people drink on the show, and I said no. I haven't had a drink in over 3 years now. I did the psychedelics thing, and you had brought up that it seems to be like a movement of the younger generation. Just booze doesn't have a place, and I think that's a good thing. But you brought up a good point.
Yeah. So I feel like the contrary take here is that alcohol's kind of gone out of vogue in society. I think especially with young people, and it's kind of like at the same time that we see like a precipitous drop in socializing, romance, all this stuff for the younger generation, right? And like, I actually think I was making this point earlier. I think alcohol is a very important part of human society. I think it's a very important social lubricant. And like, yeah, my contrarian view on it is alcohol is actually really important.
That's an interesting concept. You're the only one that I've ever heard say that. But I don't know. I'm in my 40s now, so I don't know how young people are socializing. Unless I go to downtown Nashville on Broadway,
Then you see it.
there's no shortage of alcohol there. But I wonder, how are people socializing that don't drink nowadays?
On the internet?
That's
Or
what
are they not socializing? I don't know. I mean, I think this is like a broader thing, right? Is like the era that we grew up in, went to college, went to high school, all this stuff. There weren't phones around, right? You'd get bored. You'd have to like sit and think about shit to entertain yourself, right? That whole thing, like long form thinking, like being bored. Yeah, and alcohol was like the universal social lubricant when I was in my early 20s, right?
Yeah, me too. I think it started at like 13. But yeah, that's all.
But what happens if you get rid of it, right? Is like you have a lot of people that probably just socialize a lot less.
It's got to be replaced with something. Unfortunately, you're probably right. It's probably replaced with Instagram and X and...
Yeah, I think it's social media.
Damn.
Yeah, I don't think that's great. I don't think the human brain is wired like that, right? We are social animals. Like we're animals, right? We're creatures that take on the human form, but we're an incredibly social species, and it's weird if that sort of gets replaced or like augmented in a way that doesn't line up with how our brains work with the internet.
People say the same thing about cigarettes too.
Wait, do they?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to smoke. You never smoked?
I smoked.
Yeah. You step outside of the bar and talk to the other people that are smoking. Now I feel like I'm condoning cigarettes and alcohol, which is absurd for this show.
I mean, like living in New York in my early 20s, right? If you go outside and have a cigarette with somebody, like
There's a connection.
yeah, you make friends, right?
Yeah. Or at work, or anywhere.
Yeah. Although it's just, I think nicotine, cigarettes, I think are bad for you. Like, I think makes it hard to breathe. Like, probably gonna give you cancer someday.
Well, I mean, on the flip side with the alcohol, all the broken homes, I mean, and drinking
Yeah.
of excess.
Yeah.
And I think it's ended a lot of relationships as well. I mean, I know in my prior relationships, you get to tug on the bottle a little bit too much and everything goes off the rails. But that's me.
I had the benefit of being Indian. My body just can't really handle alcohol. Yeah.
Oh shit.
One of the nice things. Yeah. Like I could never. In college, I would like to have thought that I could drink, but I don't think I could really hold my alcohol that well. We're also talking about studying math and physics at Stanford, which let me tell you about that party culture.
Tell me about it.
There's a lot of really late nights of doing problem sets. Like, all-nighter after all-nighter of doing problem sets.
Not your typical college experience, huh?
They're like living in the physics building at Stanford, right? Or spending all night in the math library at Stanford. And just like these dimly lit rooms where you're like smelling the musk of an old textbook. That was my college experience.
Nice. Well, we got a lot to talk about today.
We do, man.
Ton to talk about. So let me start you off with an introduction here. Beju Bhatt, son of immigrants who grew up in Virginia with a passion for science sparked by her father's work at NASA's Langley Research Center. A Stanford-educated physicist and mathematician who co-founded Robinhood alongside your college roommate Vlad Tenev. This no-fee trading app revolutionized the brokerage industry and shook up Wall Street, earning you an Apple Design Award in 2015 for its user-friendly design, navigated Robinhood through turbulent waters, including the GameStop trading halt and SEC settlements. Recently, you founded Etherflux, a bold new venture aiming to harness solar energy from space and beam it to Earth. I love that. I just like I was telling you before, we just had this guy Steve Quast on, and he was talking about beaming energy to the Earth.
Yeah.
And it was so far out there. I'm like, is this shit actually like real? And now here you are. You're legitimately doing it.
Yeah.
Turned off again, bro.
Husband, father of 3 boys, and you appreciate craftsmanship, hardware, product design. You're passionate about watches and cars. What are your favorite cars?
Oh man. So I got a car kind of recently, which I love this thing. It's a 1992. I like my cars old. First of all, I like my cars old and stinky.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I got this 1992 Porsche 911 RS in mint green.
Nice.
Hunting for this car for years. Finally found it.
Where'd you find it?
I think it was in Germany. Yeah.
Damn, that's awesome.
Yeah, this thing is cool. So I got into talk a little bit about building shit with our hands. So during COVID, this was kind of a
looks
wild
like you
time.
a bottom bitch.
For me, at least.
I'm cool
I
with
think
that.
for everybody, it was wild.
you
But
are.
we're all like stuck at home.
I definitely am. Or you
And
shit don't matter.
here I am, like trying to
Faggot.
lead Robinhood. So
Yeah,
at the
no,
time, Vlad and I were co-CEOs of the company, trying to lead this enterprise from like my home office, right? And you're just like in this little vortex of your own world the whole time. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I need a creative outlet. I've always been this way, where there's the main thing that I care about, that's kind of like the main thing that my energy's going towards, and there's always like a creative muse or a creative outlet or something that's completely unrelated to the work that I'm doing, which is like a passion or a hobby. And I find that that's usually where a lot of the creativity is all about, connecting unrelated ideas together, right? And seeing the threads that connect things that maybe you don't necessarily see if you just look at things very plainly. For me during COVID, I was like, man, I've been building technology, digital technology, for years and years, coming on 10 years at that point. And I kind of wanted to try my hand at building stuff, like actual stuff. So I'm like, I know how to build technology, but I don't really feel like I know how to build mechanical material things. So I was like, all right, I also love cars. Because I grew up in Virginia, and I had to drive all fucking time. Because I was taking classes at like a community college, where I was like doing some research at this particle accelerator, which meant I had to just drive around all the time. So I loved cars. And I was like, if I want to get into classic cars someday, and I convinced myself that the way that I was going to do it was start out by building a car first.
No kidding?
Yeah.
What'd you build?
So, are you familiar with this company called Factory 5?
No.
All right, very cool company. They build kit cars that are like basically like reimaginations of like Shelby race cars. So they've got the Shelby Cobra that they make, and then the one that I did is the hardtop version of it. So the Shelby Daytona. So during COVID, I had never done this before. I ordered one of these kits, got connected to a couple of people that sort of were like my automotive mentors in the early days and kind of taught me how to do it. But during COVID, in my nights and weekends and whatever spare time I had, I go from a box of parts to like a, like a thing that
That's
turned
awesome.
on. Yeah.
Did you find that difficult? Or it come naturally to you?
I like difficult things, so I did find it to be difficult for sure. But that's kind of like that's the rite of passage in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember I found myself a couple of times because there's also COVID, right? And so
There's not much to do.
there's not much to do. There's also not a lot of people that can help you do shit. So I remember finding myself a couple of times like it's like, all right, it's Saturday. What am I doing today? I'm gonna figure out how to mount this damn fuel tank onto this car. And I remember finding myself sort of on one of those little sliders underneath the car and like trying to prop the thing up on my legs and trying to screw it in. You become like a contortionist trying to build this stuff.
When was that?
This was during COVID.
How many classic cars do you have now?
Had a couple classes. Yeah.
Awesome.
My thing is I love the way that things work, and I think that experience was super interesting because you kind of go from like loving cars to being able to really be like, okay, the thing that I really like about cars is like the way that mechanical things working in a particular way. For example, right, like I think cars sound really good. Love the sound of cars, but it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, what part of the sound do you like, right? Do you like the exhaust note? Do you like the induction sound from the engine? Do you like the gears chattering? Because there's like, no sound deadening in the thing. Yeah, it's like getting a really deep understanding of all the components and being like, actually, then this is kind of one of the places that I've landed now. It's better to drive a slow car fast than to drive a fast car slow. So I actually kind of like my cars more underpowered, lightweight. So you gotta like really wring them out to actually keep up with traffic, for example.
Nice. I just got my first. I don't know if I'd call it a classic car, but
Yeah, are you into cars? Tell me. There's an engine sitting over there.
yeah. Well, love to talk about that on the air, but I can't. But
There's
for
an engine
obvious
sitting there.
reasons. But now I just got a 1977 Ford F-150.
Oh,
We were talking before. I grew up in Missouri. You were born there.
that was it.
And that was like, they just don't make cars like they used to, man.
No.
I mean, I literally just picked it up last week. I love the damn thing. I'm putting some pipes on it because I like the exhaust sound.
What kind of engine does it have?
A 351.
Nice. Yeah, I love old cars. Yeah, cars today are. All right, I'm gonna go on a bit of a limb here. They're like kind of perverted in my opinion, because I think of cars as these objects of industrial design, right? I think of them as these things that humanity invented for transportation, and there's like this artistic component to them because old cars were handmade, right? They were envisioned by the mind and built with the hand. And you look at the cars that exist today. Number one, they're designed by computers, and they look like it, in my opinion. And they're built by robots. And just like the materials and the way that things fit together, something about it really, really don't like.
What do you think about?
That's why I say it's perverted.
I'm just curious. You know what I don't like is everything's going electric. Like, didn't Ferrari get rid of all of the? They're not doing engines anymore, right? They're doing it's all electric. I think so. And what the Mercedes G-Wagon, those are getting ready to go all electric. And those things, I love the sound of those things.
Me too.
I used to drive them for work.
Big burbly V8.
Yeah, love it. But everything's going electric, and I think the sound of like these supercars are amazing. I can't envision a Ferrari flying by me with
no sound.
Yeah, it's weird.
Hugely.
I feel like it takes from the experience.
Oh man, yeah, that's not good. But I find the not just the electrification, because that you can like very quickly point a finger to that and be like, I don't like the way that works. But I think just in general how computerized cars are.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it really takes away from the experience, because when I'm sitting behind the wheel of a car, like I want to be able to know what's going on with the road surface through the way the steering wheel's moving in your hand, right? You want to be able to feel how much traction the car's got based on how much you can kind of like feel it moving through your butt.
Dude, you drive, don't you?
I do, yeah.
You go to the track?
Not that much.
Have you taken driving schools?
I have, yeah.
Which ones?
I've had some people tutor me on it before.
Dude, you have...
No, actually, I've taken the Ferrari driving school once.
How was it?
It was really fast. It was like too fast.
Dude, have you this is out.
Have you done it before?
Well, I've done a bunch of driving schools for back in the old days when I was a SEAL and contractor for CIA. They put us through a ton of schools.
Did they put you through the Ferrari school?
No. It was a lot more practical. It was like pitting and crashing into things and how to get out of situations. But I took this course. You've got to do this. Like you were talking about lighter cars, drive them faster. Mm-hmm. So there's this course in New Hampshire. It's called the O'Neill Rally Racing Course. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm. I love rally racing.
Dude, it is fucking awesome. I went there, and I think I went there for like 2 weeks. This is a long time ago, but you're out in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, and day one, I think, is the first phase is front wheel drive, then you do rear wheel drive, then you do all wheel drive, then you do off-roading, and you start off on little Ford Festivas, and move to Audis and BMWs for rear wheel drive, and you're just on these little trails in the mountains out there. The trails are like,
well, you took BMWs on dirt roads?
dude, it's awesome. Oh. It's awesome. You've got to check this out.
Oh,
it's like the coolest fucking driving school I've ever taken. And yeah, like I said, I think it's about 2 weeks long. They got all kinds of different packages, but when my son gets older, that's one of the first things I want to do with him when he can see over the steering wheel, get him out there on those trails, and it's awesome. You'll love it. I hope you do it.
Yeah, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about wanting to do that with my boys. They would love that.
Yeah, O'Neill Rally Racing School. That's not a plug. It's just
awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. Also, off-roading is really fun.
Yeah, I mean it's
really fun.
You do it all, and then you go there in the winter and do it in the snow. It's awesome. The instructors are phenomenal. I can't wait to do it again. But
yeah, I would actually love to do that. So I've done one actual driving school, which is like the Ferrari one. Kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum. Too fast. It makes you feel like you're gonna throw up the whole time.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not.
Off-roading is way more fun.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun, man. And you're moving through like these trails that are barely wide enough for the car to get through, taking right angle turns at like 50 miles. It's awesome. It is awesome.
Were there any like big old trucks on this one?
Nah, I think we used Jeep Cherokees for the off-roading. And like I said, this is like 10, 15 years ago that I did that course. I haven't taken a driving course since, but it was the most fun driving course I've taken, and I've taken a ton of them.
Yeah.
But, well, everybody starts off with a gift here.
Oh, amazing.
Vigilance League gummy bears, legal in all 50 states.
Can I have some?
Yeah, man. Dig in. Just candy. It's no funny business.
Yeah. Good stuff. I love gummy bears.
Me too. But, well, I'd love to do a life story on you.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's just start at the beginning and go in chronological order. But where'd you grow up?
So, grew up in Alabama, and then in Southern Virginia. And I guess I was grown up by the time I got to college. My family moved to the U.S. from India. My dad had grown up always wanting to study physics. So it was like his life goal. He wanted to study physics. And they're from a little town, I guess now it's a big town in India called Bhavnagar in Gujarat. And my grandfather was one of the first Western trained eye doctors.
No kid.
This has got to be in like probably the 40s, and 50s, and 60s. He was one of the first Western trained eye doctors, and was like, my children are going to go into optometry. So this is like my dad and his brothers. So my dad had always wanted to study physics, goes to college to study chemistry, I want to say. But he started a PhD in chemistry in India, and then stops doing that and is an optometrist. He's like a contact lens doctor in India, applying to PhD programs in America because he wanted to study physics. And the story that my dad tells me is that he put the word Kumar at the end of his name, which apparently means you're a bachelor, because he was like, I'm going to devote my life to science. My dad is like he's a very studious man, and I love him. But lo and behold, my dad, I think, eventually was like, all right, I'm going to get married. I think he was, I think he was maybe like, all right, maybe this coming to America to study physics thing isn't going to happen. So he gets married to my mom, and then she's pregnant with me, and then he gets into University of Huntsville, Alabama to study physics. And my mom originally, I think, was not going to come. She's like, she was the youngest of a bunch of siblings. She really loved her family in India. And the story that they told me is that they go to the embassy in India, and my mom is pregnant with me, and they're like, oh, your son, you're pregnant, right? And they're like, your son's gonna be born in America. So my mom, much to her frustration, sorry, this is going back a little bit further, but I think it's
No, this is cool.
pretty relevant. She comes to America, and we grow up. So when she first lands in America, she's in Huntsville, Huntsville, Alabama. Yeah, that's where my dad was studying physics. And I think they knew like one Indian family in America that were also doctors that were in Warrensburg, Missouri.
Right around where I grew up.
Yeah. And so my mom, the story goes, she goes out to Warrensburg right when she's about to give birth to me, because you can't afford to go to the hospital for like a week, right? So she goes there, I'm born, and then she comes back to Alabama, which is where I grew up.
What's up?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool,
Junior,
man.
I'm so sorry.
It was,
You still tight with both your parents?
yeah, very much so.
I was talking
Did
shit,
you say
so I
your
was talking
dad
shit.
in the 40s?
Oh no, I heard you.
Or in his 40s?
No, when my grandfather
One there.
studied,
Oh, okay.
which must have been in the 40s or 50s in India.
Okay. I was
Maybe
thinking,
it was 50s or 60s. No, he was born in the 40s.
Okay.
He wasn't in his 40s in the 40s.
Right. Right on. Well, what were you into? What were you into growing up?
Yeah, so my childhood was,
I turned away.
I had a really loving family,
you
but
can
the
keep going, though.
circumstances were, I think, objectively
My bad.
pretty tough a lot of times. So,
I don't have to
so this is like one of the pretty heavy-duty things that happened in my life at a pretty young age. My dad's kidneys failed. Pretty much. I think it probably started around the time he came to the
Oh
U.S.
my god. Worst
And so
sound I've
by
ever
the
made, my
time I was 4 or 5, my dad had to stop out of his PhD program to get a job to pay for the medical bills. So here we
I'm
are,
gonna kick it left.
moving to a little town called Poquoson, Virginia, next to Langley Air Force Base. Because my dad got a job at NASA Langley, and I think one of the big things for him was he's like, I have to get a job to pay for these medical bills because he started going on dialysis when I was like 5 years old. So there I was, only child, like not a lot of brown people around Southern Virginia.
I had a bad
Yeah,
job.
and actually, interestingly, I didn't learn English until I was like maybe 4 or 5. So yeah, I learned Gujarati was my first language.
It was just a roller, my bad.
No, you're
Because
good.
my
man.
mom
I'm
didn't speak
chilling.
English. We learned English together. I learned English watching TV.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm trying to right back up. I dropped
So
like 100 mmR
that was kind of
yesterday.
who I was as a kid when we got to Virginia. So what was I into as a kid? Really into
We're just getting
superheroes. I was really into like cartoons and X-Men and comic books and stuff like that. I was also really into science and space, and that a lot of that came from my dad. Because he worked at NASA.
That's cool.
It's like, what does your dad do? He's a scientist at NASA, or something that I was always really proud of and I thought was very cool. And I remember I would go to visit my dad at work sometimes. And have you been to Langley Air Force Base?
No.
Yeah, there's these huge wind tunnels, right, that are kind of on the facility. And I remember going there as a kid and just being sort of awestruck by the machinery of like science and space,
Man,
right?
look
And
at
how
fuck.
big it was.
Your
And I
guy
remember my
sucks.
dad had this, he had like a desktop computer and he was doing computer stuff on, I think he was using Linux in like the 90s. So I distinctly remember going in, like my dad had his computer at his desk.
Oh my god, BJ.
So that was a lot of my childhood. I mean, I grew up not being a terribly athletic kid. I was actually quite overweight as a child.
You were overweight?
Big time.
No kidding.
Yeah. I ended up losing a ton of weight when I got a little bit older. Like I lost like nearly a third of my body weight in high school.
Wow.
Yeah. From exercising.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my childhood, right? We were not terribly well-to-do. We lived in like a small apartment. My dad was a scientist at NASA. He was on dialysis. I was a little kid, you know, I was like a little boy. And the point at which my life fundamentally changed was when I was in 8th grade, actually. And my dad had been on dialysis this whole time and was waiting to get a kidney transplant. Like waiting year in, year out. And we had this little beeper that he would carry around with him. It's like, oh, did the beeper go off? Because if the beeper went off, it meant that one of the hospitals called because they had a kidney transplant for him. And you gotta like pack up and go. And when I was in 8th grade, my dad's kidney disease kind of took a turn for the worse. So he was on dialysis and he got this infection. And I don't think they really understood what was happening at the time, but he got very, very sick from the catheter that was in his stomach, basically, for him to be able to do dialysis. And my dad goes from being sick to being very sick to being hospitalized to my mom being like every day waking up in the morning and going and staying with my dad at the hospital all day. And I was just kind of like home alone. Just fucking confused.
Damn.
Being like, what do I do? Right? Like, where does life go from here? Feels completely rudderless. Didn't have any siblings, right? I was not cool at all. I was like fat brown kid in school. Like there wasn't a lot of, I had a couple of friends. Actually one good friend from that period that's still a friend of mine. But I just remember feeling so unbelievably lost. And then my dad's health continues to take a turn for the worse. And he has a couple of really major surgeries where, you know, at 13 or whatever it was, I remember staring down the specter of what happens if my dad passes away. By the way, my dad is healthy and alive today, so probably worth saying that. I'm like, what happens, right? I want to go back to India. I've never lived there. My parents couldn't even afford to go back to India. By the way, the last time I went back to India was in 1997. 97, maybe 98.
Did you go back? Is that like the only time you went back to India, or did you go back and forth a couple times?
Probably when I was a little kid, I went like 2 or 3 times.
But you don't remember it?
Vague memories of it. But I'm an American, right? Like, through and through. So that's happening, and I'm like, well, what do I do, right? I don't feel like I can control anything in my life. But growing up in my household, it was like this theme will come back a little bit later on, right? Is like, you have to make the most of the opportunities in life. And America is the land of opportunity. And my dad did beat one thing into my head, which is education, education, education. Like, that's your way out. So I go from not being a terribly good student to being like, I'm gonna get really good at math. I'm gonna get really good at physics, because no matter what, that'll give me some purpose in life. And if I'm doing really well in school, that'll be kind of like the thing that pulls me forward. Lo and behold, a few months later, my dad, his kidney disease that he had that had him hospitalized, which I'm talking about it kind of vaguely because I don't think they really know what happened, other than the fact that he had a really bad infection. He starts to get better, and they're like, give this man a kidney transplant. Like, he's been on death's door. And so he gets a kidney transplant. By the time that happens, which is I think the summer between 8th and 9th grade for me, I was
Holy
like
shit.
full on.
I'm retarded.
At that point, because I'm like, I have to do well in school.
Supposed to go up, not across.
That's my mission in life. And if I do really well in school, that's going to be how I like carve my own path out, because I didn't want to feel rudderless anymore. I wanted some degree of agency, some control over my life. And so I go from being not a very good student to being just locked in.
Wow.
And just at that point, like, figured out that I loved physics, I loved math. I'd kind of been given this gift of being introduced to this as a kid by my dad, right? And one of the interesting things growing up, right, is like doing well in school or studying math and stuff like this. This was not cool when we were kids, right? Like, you're kind of a loser if you did stuff like this, which I think is not a good thing. Like, I don't think that's a weird and bad thing for society to reinforce. Like, we want our young people to cherish education, because otherwise they're not going to know what the fuck they're talking about, right? Like, that's what that era of life is about learning stuff, so that you have a better lens to look at, like, this weird thing called adulthood in life through. So,
what was your dad studying at NASA? What was he working on?
he was doing atmospheric sciences.
What is that?
He was doing, like, satellite imaging.
No kid.
Is that fucking wild?
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up. It goes around full circle.
I mean, do you guys talk a lot about what you're doing now?
We do, yeah. He's my dad's a little bit older now, and he really wants to be involved. But honestly, at this stage, it's nice just to have something cool to talk to my dad about. Yeah, so they come over and hang out with the kids pretty often.
They live next to you or close to you? Or?
They live pretty close by.
Yeah, that's cool, man. That's cool. I wish my parents lived closer.
Where do your parents live?
They're in Florida.
That's right.
Yeah, they're in Florida. I moved to Florida, and then the whole family moved to Florida, and then
Really?
I left Florida. So, yeah, wanted to, like I told you downstairs, I wanted to raise my kids in a different environment than South Florida. It's just a little too wild down there.
Yeah, at which point I made the argument that the best place to raise kids is Silicon Valley. which I don't actually think that's true.
With my busy schedule, I really need to take care of my wellness by getting a good night's sleep. For years now, I've had my Helix mattress that they've sent me to try, and it's really helped me sleep through the night and feel energized the next morning. I sleep without interruption and without any back pain, and I truly wake up feeling refreshed, and I'm always ready for whatever the day brings. Helix is made to fit your body type and sleep position, and Helix has been recommended by multiple leading professionals as a go-to solution for getting help improving sleep, especially if you have snoring issues, have sleep apnea, have trouble sleeping through the night,
I have
or
all those
if you're
issues.
sleeping too hot. They can even recommend which mattress will work best for you. Now's the best time to try Helix, and they're giving my